Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
When I bought my first home in 2006, I was full of excitement and optimism. The housing market was booming and I was thrilled to be a homeowner. I chose a house in an HOA neighborhood, thinking it would be a wise investment that would protect my property value. The concept of an HOA seemed reasonable to me at the time. I imagined it would ensure that the neighborhood stayed neat and tidy, that my property would be safe, and that I wouldn't have to worry about any unsightly changes made by neighbors. But what I didn't realize was that the HOA would soon become the bane of my existence, a thorn in my side that I could never quite remove. When I first moved in, I quickly noticed something off about the house's exterior. The shutters were painted in a hodgepodge of colors. Some were a dark, moody blue, while others were a stark, mismatched black. It looked like the previous owner had started a painting project but gave up halfway through, unable to reach the higher windows. It didn't take long for the sight of those mismatched shutters to drive me crazy. I had just moved in, trying to settle into my new life, but all I could focus on was how the house looked from the outside. It was like wearing a shirt with one sleeve a different color than the other. So, like any responsible homeowner, I decided to fix the problem. I bought some paint that matched the black shutters, got a ladder, and spent an entire Saturday painting them all to match. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but satisfied. The house finally looked the way it should, a unified, elegant appearance. I stepped back to admire my work, proud that I'd taken the initiative to improve my property. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. I felt like I had just crossed off the first task on a long list of home improvements. However, that feeling of accomplishment didn't last long. Just a few days later, I found a letter in my mailbox from the HOA. My heart sank as I read the notice. They were informing me that my recent changes to the shutters were not approved by the architectural committee. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I had improved the appearance of my home, made it look more consistent, and yet here I was being chastised for it. The letter stated that I had 10 days to correct this so-called violation, or I would start incurring daily fines. I was stunned, but more than that, I was angry. They would rather have me keep the mismatched, half-finished shutters than allow me to make my house look better. What kind of logic was that? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was only the beginning. The letter was a harbinger of things to come, and it didn't take long before I felt like I had a target on my back. Over the next few months, the violation letters became a regular occurrence. It seemed like I couldn't do anything without getting a notice from the HOA. The cul-de-sac where we lived didn't have much space for parking, so sometimes people would park curbside. Almost immediately, I got a violation letter. One day, I hung up curtains in the living room to add some privacy and make the space cozier. A few days later, another violation letter arrived. The HOA claimed that my curtains didn't meet their aesthetic standards. Who knew that curtains could be so offensive? Living under the constant scrutiny of the HOA was exhausting. Every little thing I did felt like it was being watched and judged. I started second-guessing every decision, worrying about what new rule I might be breaking without even realizing it. I felt like I was living in a prison, one where the guards were the very people who were supposed to be my neighbors. Eventually, the stress became too much. I couldn't enjoy my home anymore. It felt like every decision was a minefield. I decided to move out, but selling the house wasn't an option. The housing market had crashed, and I was underwater on the mortgage. The house was worth far less than what I had paid for it. My dream of home ownership had turned into a nightmare, and I was stuck in it. The only thing I could do was rent the house out and hope that one day the market would recover enough for me to sell without taking a massive loss. Renting out the house brought its own set of challenges. I was constantly worried about how the tenants were handling the endless stream of HOA violations. Each time I heard from them, I braced myself for bad news. Would it be another complaint from the HOA about the grass being too long? Or perhaps the tenants had parked in the wrong spot. The violations continued to roll in, and each one felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that I was still trapped by the HOA's grip. Years passed, and I continued to rent out the house, all the while waiting for the housing market to rebound. The value of the house slowly climbed, inching closer and closer to what I had originally paid. But those years were filled with tension, each day haunted by the possibility that the HOA would find yet another reason to penalize me. It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. never knowing when it would happen but knowing that it inevitably would. Finally, after years of waiting and worrying, the day came when I could sell the house. I had been keeping a close eye on the market, and I knew that I was no longer underwater on the mortgage. It was time to get out from under the oppressive weight of the HOA. The sale process was nerve-wracking. I feared that something would go wrong, that the HOA would somehow find a way to sabotage the sale, or that the market would crash again at the last minute. But against all odds, everything went smoothly. I closed the sale, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe again. The sense of relief was overwhelming. I was finally free from the clutches of the HOA, free from the endless violations and the constant stress. It felt like I had escaped a toxic relationship, one where I had been gaslighted into believing that I was always in the wrong, no matter how hard I tried to do things right. I celebrated that night, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that had been there for far too long. But the HOA wasn't done with me yet. The very next day, I received a final violation notice. The timing couldn't have been more ridiculous. It arrived just one day after the closing. It was almost as if the HOA was trying to get in one last jab, one final reminder that they had controlled my life for over a decade. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it. The letter detailed a supposed infraction regarding the landscaping that had been done just before the sale. It was absurd. I had followed all the guidelines, and yet here was another attempt to drag me back into the nightmare I had just escaped. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. How could they still be targeting me even after the sale? It was as if they were determined to have the last word, to remind me that my time in their jurisdiction would not go quietly. They had already lost their hold on me, and this last violation was nothing more than a desperate attempt to exert power they no longer had. As I crumpled up that final letter, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. I was no longer their prisoner. The house, the HOA, the endless violations, they were all in the past. I was free, and I was never looking back. The nightmare was over, and I was ready to move on with my life, leaving the oppressive rule of the HOA far behind me. Looking back, I can see how naive I was when I first bought that house. I thought I was making a smart investment, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The HOA had turned what should have been a peaceful, happy home into a source of constant stress and anxiety. But in the end, I won. I survived their ridiculous rules and violations. I sold the house, and I walked away stronger for it. Now, whenever I think about buying another home, I steer clear of anything with an HOA. I've learned my lesson. I value my freedom too much to ever let myself be trapped like that again. Home ownership should be a joy, not a burden. And I'm determined to make sure that's the case from now on. The past is behind me, and I'm looking forward to a future where I can truly enjoy the freedom that comes with owning my own home, without the specter of an overreaching HOA lurking in the background. Side note on this comment: I have no idea why she is going off about being naked. It was the color of the curtains they took issue with. Legally, looking into your house is protected by the Fourth Amendment, but it had to be from the sidewalk. If I can see you plan as day naked from the sidewalk, it can be public indecency. The counter-argument to this is, it is your own and you can do what you want in it. Now, has this been a case? No, this theory case here is based off a case in the 90s where the cops saw drug paraphernalia, drugs and other items from the sidewalk and raid a house. Very different story than walking around naked. I feel walking around naked is a normal thing versus selling, promoting illegal drugs. So long story short, if a person can see into your house from the sidewalk, it's public, and is rules by those rules. If they have to step off the sidewalk, they are now trespassing. I used to work for a custom drapery maker, and we had a client that spent thousands of dollars on new drapes for her new house. She got an HOA warning when she put them up because the side facing out wasn't lined. Sent them back to us to be lined, gets them back and rehangs. Warned again, now the lining isn't the right color. We ended up sending samples of everything we could get our hands on from our regular suppliers to find her something that would satisfy the HOA's ridiculously exacting requirements. The rule there was basically to discourage draperies in favor of modern window shades to go with the HOA's ridiculous aesthetics. Good for you. I grew up in a community with an HOA-type organization. There it was called CSA, Community Services Association, or something like that. Those prats are the worst. We would constantly get violation notices about our back deck not being properly maintained. If that was true, then fine, but we didn't even have a back deck, or a front deck, or any kind of deck. My parents also got all kinds of notices about toys and bikes and whatnot being left on the front lawn, while I, the youngest child, was away at college and definitely not playing with toys or riding bikes in front of the house. Now, the neighbors 5 houses down, 3 kids between the ages of 2 to 9, toys everywhere, but no violation notices. We also would get cited for having our dog off leash and not cleaning up the dog poop. Again, we never had a dog. My mom is severely allergic to dogs, so we had indoor-only cats. I moved the hell out of there as soon as I could, and will never live in an HOA-type community ever again. I have been trying to get my parents to leave too, but my oldest sister and her husband live there, and my parents want to be close to the grandkids.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
When we first laid eyes on the house, it felt like a dream come true. The neighborhood was quiet, the trees were mature and provided just the right amount of shade, and the idea of living somewhere without the restrictions of an HOA was a significant bonus. No rules dictating what color we could paint our front door, no monthly fees siphoning away our hard-earned money, just pure unbridled freedom. The listing had clearly stated no HOA, and our excitement only grew as we moved through the purchasing process. The contract reinforced what we believed to be true. We were free from the clutches of any homeowners association. For over a year, we enjoyed our new home in peace. Weekends were spent on projects we chose, not ones mandated by a faceless board. We hung our own holiday decorations, planted what we wanted in our garden, and even considered painting the front door a daring shade of red. The thought of a neighborhood association with its rules and regulations never crossed our minds again. Until the letter arrived. It was an unassuming envelope, plain and white, the kind you get for bills or insurance notifications. But as soon as I opened it, a sense of dread washed over me. The letterhead was the first thing that caught my eye. A bold, authoritative font spelling out the name of the neighborhood HOA. My heart skipped a beat as I continued to read, my hands trembling slightly. They were accusing us of violating Regulation 6 by allowing algae to accumulate on the side of our house. I could almost hear the stern tone in which the letter was written, demanding immediate action to rectify this supposed violation. But that wasn't what sent my mind spinning. It was the fact that they were treating us as though we were part of the HOA, something that we had never agreed to. My thoughts raced. How could this be happening? We had been so careful during the purchasing process. I remembered our real estate agent assuring us that this house was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The contract had explicitly stated no HOA. There had been no mention of regulations, no annual dues, no meetings to attend. And yet, here we were, holding a letter that implied otherwise. I showed the letter to my husband. His brow furrowed as he read it, his face a mix of confusion and frustration. "This doesn't make any sense," he said, shaking his head. "We're not part of an HOA. We never have been." His words were firm, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. We immediately decided to take action. I sat down at the computer and composed a terse email to the HOA manager listed at the bottom of the letter. I asked for legal proof that we were part of their association, something in writing that would explain this baffling situation. I hit send, half expecting a swift reply that would clear up what had to be a simple mistake. But days went by without a response. Meanwhile, my husband contacted the titling company that had handled our closing. If anyone could give us a definitive answer, it was them. We held our breath as they dug into the records, hoping beyond hope that we had not somehow overlooked something crucial in the fine print. When they finally called us back, their answer was clear. We were not and had never been part of the HOA. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave, but it was quickly followed by a simmering anger. How dare this HOA try to assert control over us? What right did they have to send us such a letter, threatening us with consequences for a regulation that didn't even apply to us? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I called the HOA manager listed at the bottom of the letter. The phone rang several times before a curt voice answered. "Hello, this is Sandra, HOA manager. How can I help you?" "Hi, this is Emily Thompson. I received a letter about a violation on my property, but there's been a mistake. We're not part of the HOA." There was a pause on the other end. "All properties in the neighborhood are subject to HOA rules, Mrs. Thompson." "Not ours," I insisted. "Our contract explicitly states no HOA." Sandra's voice took on an edge. "I'll need to verify that with our records." Despite our frustration, we decided to deal with the algae. Not because of the HOA's demand, but because we took pride in our home. We had always been meticulous about maintaining our property, and we weren't about to let a patch of algae mar the appearance of our house. The thought of the HOA watching us, waiting for us to comply, made my skin crawl, but we refused to give them the satisfaction of thinking they had any real power over us. The weekend arrived, and we spent a few hours scrubbing the algae away. It was hard work, but it felt good to take control of the situation on our own terms. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The neighbors, most of whom were part of the HOA, seemed to glance our way more often than usual. I imagined them whispering about us, speculating on whether we were really members of their association or just rebels who had slipped through the cracks. But as satisfying as it was to clean up the algae, the unease lingered. What if this wasn't the end of it? What if the HOA continued to send letters, each one more threatening than the last? The idea of battling a powerful neighborhood association was daunting, especially when we knew we were in the right but couldn't predict what they might try next. Weeks passed, and the silence from the HOA was deafening. The manager never responded to my email and nothing more from the phone call, but no more letters arrived in the mail. It was as though they had simply given up on us, realizing that they had no authority over our property. But the experience had left a mark. We were no longer as carefree as we had been when we first moved in. The illusion of freedom had been shattered, replaced by the knowledge that even in a place where we thought we were safe from HOA overreach, we could still be targeted. One evening, as we sat on the porch enjoying a rare moment of peace, my husband turned to me and said, "Do you think this is really over?" His question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything we had been through. "I hope so," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction. "But I don't know." We decided to be proactive. If the HOA tried to contact us again, we would be ready. We gathered all the documents from our home purchase, the listing, the contract, the titling company's confirmation that we were not part of the HOA. We kept them in a folder by the front door, ready to pull out at a moment's notice. We even considered contacting a lawyer, just in case the situation escalated. As the months went by, the tension gradually eased. We started to feel like we could breathe again, like we could enjoy our home without constantly looking over our shoulders. The HOA had gone quiet, and we dared to hope that they had moved on to more compliant targets. But the experience had changed us. The dream home that we had once seen as a sanctuary now felt more like a battleground, a place where we had to constantly defend our right to live as we chose. Looking back, I can't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, we had stood our ground and protected our rights. On the other hand, we had been forced to confront a reality we never expected. The idea that an HOA could try to assert control over us, even when we weren't part of it, was something that still boggles my mind. It made me wonder how many other homeowners had faced similar situations, feeling powerless against the might of these associations. But life goes on, and so did we. We continued to improve our home, making it the place we had always dreamed it would be. The red front door we had once considered became a reality, a bold statement of our independence. Every time I walked past it, I felt a sense of pride, not just in the color but in what it represented. It was a reminder that we had fought back and won, that we had refused to be bullied into submission. Yet even as we moved forward, a part of me remained on edge, always alert for the next challenge. Because if this experience had taught me anything, it was that peace is fragile, and sometimes the battles you think are over are just waiting for the right moment to start again. What a nightmare! You thought you were free from the clutches of an HOA, only to receive a letter that makes it seem like you're being targeted for something completely absurd. The idea that they would try to impose their rules on you, despite your clear documentation stating otherwise, is not just frustrating but downright ridiculous. It's a classic case of HOA overreach, and it's unacceptable. You deserve to live in peace without being harassed by a group that clearly has no idea what they're doing. The fact that they sent you a letter about algae accumulating on your property when you're not even part of their association is a blatant abuse of power. It's astonishing that they think they can dictate how you maintain your home. Their failure to respond to your inquiries only adds to the frustration. You shouldn't have to deal with this nonsense. Keep all your records organized and be prepared to fight back if they try to pull this again. Consider reaching out to a lawyer to ensure your rights are protected. You have every right to enjoy your home without the threat of an overreaching HOA looming over you. This is a wake-up call for all homeowners to stand up against such harassment and demand accountability from these organizations. You are not alone in this battle. What a ridiculous situation. You thought you had found a peaceful haven away from the restrictions of an HOA, only to be blindsided by a letter demanding compliance for something you're not even responsible for. This is a reality of HOA overreach, and it's infuriating that they think they can impose their will on you. Their failure to acknowledge your inquiries only highlights their incompetence. You shouldn't have to live in fear of their threats. Keep your documents ready and be prepared to stand your ground. Don't let them bully you into submission. You deserve better. It's time to take a stand against this kind of harassment and make sure they know you won't be pushed around. Lawyer up if you need to and sue their asses off. I can't believe the nerve of this HOA. They send you a letter accusing you of violating a regulation when you're not even part of their association? That's not just ridiculous. It's a blatant abuse of power. It's clear they're trying to exert control over homeowners who have no obligation to them. The fact that they didn't even bother to respond to your inquiries is a display of their utter incompetence. You shouldn't have to live in fear of their threats. Stand your ground, keep your records organized, and be ready to take action if they try to pull this nonsense again. It's infuriating that they think they can just impose their will on anyone they please. You deserve to live in peace without the threat of an overreaching HOA looming over you. Document everything, and if necessary, consult with a lawyer to ensure your rights are protected. Don't let them intimidate you. You have every right to enjoy your home without their interference.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.